Hey, good Tuesday morning, and thanks for checking out your latest long-range forecast update. Michael Clark here with BAM Weather. Got a lot to discuss here today. I'm going to try to make it quicker. Of course, I always say that, and then it always goes longer, but I'm going to try to make it quicker. I know a lot of you are out in the fields getting work done, or at least preparing to do so, so maybe you can watch this while you're out in the field and working and whatnot. So let's get right into the setup here, or kind of what's happened the last 3 days. This is a look at precipitation observations the last 3 days. With the warmth working in, this area here really going to get a nice dry stretch with little to no rainfall and very warm temperatures, 80s, even some 90s possible. We've had some rain here across Iowa, but the big story has been just the relentless rains across the Dakotas, Minnesota, North Nebraska. Talk about flipping a switch here to just really wet here very quickly across the northern plains. And this is the area, guys, this area here, I want to preface, it's going to be difficult to, if not impossible, for there to be a lot of progress here, okay? It's going to be better in here. It's going to be even better here, all right, into the east. So questionable conditions here this week, but a lot of progress and good conditions here. Not so great further back into the plains based on just weather patterns and observations there, right? The percent of normal precip is interesting. I wanted to show this because it's not necessarily that this pattern has been excessively wet. Here's 30-day departures. What it is the timing. It's been the timing of the rain and the overall temperature pattern that has just been rather unfavorable. Because if you look, there are spots that are still over the last 30 days, they're technically drier than the normal. And there's a lot of corn, there's a lot of soybean crop in these areas. This is in some of the major production areas where precipitation is actually below the 30-day departure or the 30-day normal. So I think with the warmth of this week, a lot of these areas, when reality kind of sets in, a lot of these areas will probably be able to get going pretty quickly or dry out pretty quickly. Some areas that may have some problems, where we've had some kind of garden spots, have been Northwest Ohio, Northeast Indiana, Southern Michigan, and then of course the painfully obvious area we've already discussed across the northern plains, okay? Precipitation the next 7 days, it's a tricky one. It's a pattern of the haves and the have-nots, and someone might get it there, someone might get it here. Regardless, there's no significant systems. There's no big weather systems to put big dents in things, if and unless you're in the southern Canadian prairies, northern plains, this area here, like I said, 1 to 2 inches of rain the next 7 days are dialed up. This area in here, again, this is more of a hit or miss pattern of showers and storms. If you get under one, maybe you get a ½ inch to 3/4 of an inch of rain. If you don't, you might not get any. There's going to be a lot of people in here that don't get much of anything, but there are at least the isolated scattered storm chances on the periphery of the ridge here as we get into the weekend, okay? Here's a look at the precip data trends overnight. These were some exceptionally wetter trends. If you remember, if you watched yesterday, we talked about the potential at the week 2 forecast will trend back wetter. This is not going to be just a dry a pattern where everything shuts off. It's not the pattern for that. But in the 6 to 10, the GEFS, the EPS, and the GFS, and especially in the 11 to 15, much wetter trends in the European data. Overall, GEFS as well, and the GFS operational. Overall, the data just trended wetter overnight. That's the takeaway here. And when you look at this, especially in that 11 to 15 day pattern, is where we're looking at above normal precipitation to come back. And I want to remind you that our color table here, when it shows green, it actually is quite a bit above normal. It's actually at least 125% or more of the normal. So we've redone the colors here to just try and make that process a little easier to read and to understand. So EPS, again, definitely significantly wetter in week 2. And with the setup, with the setup at 500 millibars, kind of a ridge moving into the east and the south and a trough backing up the backside of it, to me it looks active. And I kind of don't have any reason to disagree or think otherwise of that. This is the week 2 precip forecast slide. We'll zoom this out a little bit so you can see it. Maybe. Here we go. And this is the week 2 precip forecast from us officially. And again, this is the 17th to the 23rd. And for the most part, guys, the Corn Belt, the growing regions, is average to above average precipitation being forecasted, especially Indiana, Illinois, Missouri down through northeast Arkansas. And that's where we talked about we do have some targeted fronts and storm dates. Better flow develops in part of the Ohio and Missouri Valley as well. We're not seeing anything substantially wetter, but more widespread risks should at least be present for that to be that way. Okay, so keep that in mind. You get the work done this week. If you can't, and more comes next week, that's going to make it difficult, right? The temperature trends the next 15 days. For the most part, we're looking at a very warm 1 to 5 day stretch. All models agree, location, placement, timing, no question there. Front sweeps through in the 6 to 10. You can see it kind of knocks down the incredibly warm temperatures. All models agreeing on that. And then in the 11 to 15, EPS bringing in a little bit more cooler as well. GEFS to the east. GFS very aggressive with the cool down there in week 2. Regardless, a cool down will accompany the week 2 threat for more rainfall as the ridge fades and the front moves in. So the official forecast for week 2 favors more of seasonal temperatures in the main U.S. growing regions, slightly warmer to the southwest, slightly colder in the Great Lakes, interior northeast, and the kind of the northeastern sections of the growing regions. Still very, very warm in the south central plains there for week 2. This feature here is what has my attention beyond week 2. This is the ridge in the North Pacific Ocean or the Bering Sea, and this is a loop of the next 10 days. And what's interesting to me is the persistence and the strength of the forecasted ridge here in the North Pacific Ocean the next 10 days. The correlation to that late May into early June has me kind of thinking that there could be somewhat of a significant heat wave. I'm reluctant or somewhat hesitant to say that. And the only reason I say that is because a lot of the analog years, a lot of the research doesn't support significant June heat. But this signal here, along with a very, very impressive SOI rise of nearly 40 points, really would suggest that a warm period to close out May and open June would be in the forecast. Potentially significant warmth or some type of heat wave for some time there to close out the month and open June. So whatever that means for you, I don't really know what it means other than there's heat in the forecast, and there could be some significant heat, especially if you look at this SOI rise and how it correlated to this warm-up, okay? And then you look at the next really, really big one, and you can see the sub-seasonal model data already picking up on that trend. And the downfall, the fall of the SOI showing the cold front, right? The fall shows the trough, the rise shows the ridge, right? So something to consider. The updated CFS weeklies, the American model sub-seasonal model guidance here, the 24th of May through the 6th of June, has a really much more persistent signal for heat, okay? Moderately above average. In fact, in some cases here, much above average to end May and open June. So the CFS weeklies kind of support that heat wave signal or that North Pacific ridge and that SOI rise. That's reflected nicely in the data. And in the forecast for precip, it would keep things kind of, really, I think the best term is seasonal. I think back and forth and a dry period here, a wet period there. Not necessarily seeing major dry risks with this yet. Could it trend that way? Possibly. Again, the analogs, the research, a lot of the data does not suggest dry risks in June. It suggests the opposite, really. So I'm not ready to go that route, but I am confident in saying an increasing confident level here for June heat. Late May, early June heat, possibly significant for a few days, is certainly on the table. EPS weekly ran last night. This is the 3 to 4 week outlook. It's also trying. It got quite a bit warmer, all right, and it's somewhat suggesting there would probably be a ridge here, based on the model. You can kind of see what it would do. The flow around the ridge would do this, okay, and you can see precip how it would kind of rotate around it just based on this chart, up and around and over, and again, majority of the corn belt and the soybean belt, I don't think is looking at any risks for suddenly dry and hot, unless this idea changes going forward, all right? Now, that week 3 to 4 period, we've gone pretty warm, much above average temperatures anticipated with the exceptions of the Pacific Northwest, South Central Plains, excessively above normal, some significant heat will be possible there. And we're going pretty far above the normal population-weighted cooling degree days, as a big chunk of Texas would be included in that. Much above normal temperatures, probably a stretch of 90s in the cards here, early June. Chicago, Indy, Des Moines, St. Louis, probably be a week or so of 90-degree heat being on the table with this type of forecast. And then the precipitation outlook would favor, like I said, a continued seasonal to slightly above normal precipitation pattern. It still just does not look good up here in the northern plains, in the Pacific Northwest, southern Canadian prairies. Elsewhere, it's still average to above average precip for the majority of the U.S. growing regions, with the exception of getting pretty dry, where it's going to be pretty warm down here to end May and open June. If there's any severe weather risks in this period, they're not significant. They're not anything widespread severe weather outbreaks or nothing like that I see in the cards. That's calming down for the time being. That's all I have for today. If you have questions, hit the chat button, shoot us an email, and have a safe week. Make sure you're making good decisions, staying safe out there in the fields and the planters, and keeping safety first. We'll talk to you soon.